Ready as we are going to be here. Let's see how it goes. Hey folks, it's T-8 and counting on the Artificial Life Creation Challenge. Lots of stuff to look at here. Let's start with this. This is our cell wall, our cell membrane starting to work. One thing I want to call your attention to is occasionally, so you see these orange flashes happening in various places. That's where contact information is being signaled from the edge of the grid in to the center. And sometimes, I think there was one right here, especially from the very, yeah, there was one. You see things that aren't actually real, that it's just a phantom of the signaling system. I think of the thing being itchy. We'll watch this just for a little bit more. Let this simulation run for 2 million EPs, 2 million average events per site across the whole grid, because I wanted to get a lot of interactions and make sure that these things weren't still smashing fusing themselves together or getting stuck to each other. But, when it starts going faster like this, it really starts looking very, to me, pretty organic, except for the fact that it's a diamond. You could sort of imagine, like looking at some pond scum in a microscope and seeing some of these things or something. Anyway, so this is the main progress for this week. But hello, hi. It's T2sday 3127. Here's where the goals for this time did pretty well on most of them. Did not do loop operations. That will continue over to next time. That doesn't put us behind on the overall. I'm not even going to talk about the outline. I'm just going to do it. So here's our overall outline spreadsheet that I made in July. That's actually still holding together pretty well. And here we are at T-8 HC3 sequencer. That's hard cell 3, the diamond grids, sequencer, and borders. What we have today is borders. What we'll have next time is the HC3 sequencer, and hopefully the rest of the countdown we will continue to count. Moving on. So, why do we care so much about cell borders? Well, once again, here is the overall global view of what we're trying to do, going from a mother to grow, reorganize, copy the genetic information, split, and have a mother and a daughter that can do the same thing. And right there, at the very beginning, we're talking about a discrete organism that has an edge that I drew a wall around. This is the cell wall. This is what we're trying to get done with the border around the diamond matrix. So let's take a quick minute to just look at the simulator. All right, I've got it set up here so that maybe we can sort of see what's going on. So where the heck is, all right, here we are. So HC3, that is the hard cell 3. So those are the matrix. You can see 3, 3, 3. They're each of them 3 apart, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. But we got these MBs next to it. Those are the membrane bases. And what they try to do at the edge of the hard cell 3 matrix, we don't have, normally we have a complete little 2x2 units all over the place, but at the edge we have 3 HC3s and no fourth one, because that would be off the end. So I call those broken pockets, and the MB, the membrane base, they colonize the broken pockets that are supposed to be at the edge of the thing, and they're looking out to see stuff that's going on, and they're also looking out to see MSs, which are the membrane sensors. Those are the distant early warning systems that look out further. And in fact, what we're seeing right here in this is a replay. I've backed up the events. This is about to have in its event, just at the edge of its event window. Can you see that? We've got this green outline showing how much an individual event can see, and it's fundamental to everything about the movable feast is to understand the event window. That when one atom is having an event, that's what it can see and alter. So in this case, this guy can just barely see a membrane sensor from a different cell, and it can tell it's a different cell because the sensor has a open door that says which direction it's looking in versus which direction it thinks is its own cell, and these differ. So when we go ahead and have an event here, boom, now this event is starting to signal. It's signaling that there's a contact directly to the west. And if we let this thing keep going, that'll keep spreading on through. But that's the idea. So if we look at this, here we've got this HC3 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's 12 sites away from the nearest HC3 of the other cell, but yet they have detection, they have contact, and in fact the other cell had already seen what's going on. So the diamond cell membrane that goes around the outside, it does all of these things for us. Number one, it helps spatially isolate the inside of the diamond cell from the outside, to let each guy know. The HC3 atoms itself, they don't actually, they know which direction they're going based on the neighbors that look downhill. We've talked about that before. But if another HC3 diamond grid comes too close, they can get confused. They can think, do I belong here or do I belong there? and having the membranes around it, having the layered defense in depth. The final point there, this is defense in depth goes back, it's a military strategy of having, instead of having one absolutely firm line that you're going to hold forever, you have fallbacks and layered defenses. Got taken over by computer security talks about defense in depth, which is easier said than done when you're talking about computer security within a single computer. Defense in depth doesn't really work, because as soon as you have a breach of the program RAM, the random access memory, you can take over the whole RAM like that. That's kind of the point of random access memory. But in the movable feast, in cellular automata, we have actual spatial locations, and we can actually make certain amount of progress by saying, I control this much space, and furthermore, don't even come within, an 12 sites of me, or I'm going to notice and I'm going to react. Now, they don't have a lot of ability to react except to run, but that's really important. So provide early warnings of outside threats, and didn't talk about it, but the membrane base and the membrane sensor are both sacrificial. We can just roll over, if the thing does get too close, those things will get put out of the way. And the membrane base not only reacts by copying what the membrane sensor says, they also react if they don't see any membrane sensor. And in fact, that's what we saw at the very beginning of the opening clip, that when the cells were first coming out, there was all kinds of orange signaling going on, and that's because the membrane sensor layer hadn't grown yet. So the whole thing was feeling very itchy as it was scabbing up until it got running. All right, I did it. I took the Cold War, the DEW line, the distant early warning line that was supposed to be like watching Russia so that we'd see the missiles coming in. I understand from Wikipedia that it's not the DEW line anymore. They've replaced it, but, hey, I'm a boomer. And the idea is we have 4 levels of contact, DEFCON, I'm mixing my metaphors. Open, meaning I don't see anything. Sight, meaning the sensors have seen something, just barely on the horizon. Contact, meaning that we've seen something much closer, that the membrane base have seen not just what the membrane sensor cells, but they see some problems directly, or the HC3 tail, the HC3 edge is seeing something, which is even worse. And then the worst case is damage, when we have actually an HC3 in the interior of the cell is seeing something that's supposed to be there. That's not completely implemented yet, but that's the worst case. So the root, when it's making a decision about what to do, will have a choice about, well, okay, I can see some sightings, but I'd rather get away from the damage, or whatever. And that's all, it seems, working. So, this is the title card. Cell defense in depth meaning layers. Here we have our 2 giant political powers, Cell 1 and Cell 2. They've come in sighting distance of each other, and the reports are now flowing up back to the root for decisions to be made. All right, moving on. Debezelification. This was the clip I showed last time, the screenshot that had, it looked, all right, there's a diamond grid, but because the T2 tiles have these bezels, these frames around them, there's connectors for the intertile connectors, there's a grid power light, over here is the tile power light, all of this stuff. That means the LCD in the middle is quite distant from the adjacent LCD of the tiles, and so I worked on that. Let's take a look at this. Looks like a brick wall in the dark with stuff being projected on it, but the stuff that's coming out of the wall. I didn't trim it any closer because there's enough variation from position to position. This was the best I dared to go to. The color rendition is also not great. A lot of that is due to the cheapness of the LCD panels I'm using. May be able to fix this. This is already trying to do some color correction. You might have seen some itching going on there on the lower left one. This is still running. Hopefully we'll have a longer one with stuff bouncing around a lot later. All right, and so that's all using this FFmpeg program, which I think stands for fucking fast MPEG. It doesn't, but I wish it could. I mean, and this is stressing it pretty hard. You know, each one of those images is a separate image crop, which are then overlaid one at a time on the output thing. And you know, the bottom line for me is it takes over an hour to process a day's worth of data, which is kind of a long time, but on the other hand, it's less than a day, so we can get this working. So that's that. Finally, you know, thanks so much for taking a look at these videos, or this video, being here now, wherever you have managed to find this. You know, the T2 Tile project is still super duper tiny. But I think the artificial life creation countdown is helping. It's drawing in a few new people. YouTube says that the previous update, T-9, is reaching a wider audience. And so I thought maybe in the very end here, I would spend a minute trying to just, you know, reset a little bit of the backstory and, you know, how I got to be doing this and, you know, just, you know, what's going on here. Now, you know, I could say, you know, I am an emeritus professor of computer science, yada, yada, and I have done blah, 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 and so forth. But I thought instead I would take 1 minute and show you this.
Hi, I'm Dave Ackley. I'd like to present the results of some work. How can an organism learn during its lifetime, given only its own death as feedback? So organisms with good evaluation functions in their genes will tend to learn good things and will proliferate a source of reinforcement signals. Here's the data we obtained. This is an overview of the world. This diagram depicts the array of inputs that each agent receives. At about 600 time steps, he was quite lucky to survive an extended encounter with a carnivore. The result of the learning algorithm in this interaction was such that it corrected the genetic defect in the action network he was born with. Shortly thereafter, he produced the first of his 4 children. Of course, if you took a stable population of natural guys like this and stuck in a couple of those hand-designed guys, they'd take over in a couple of generations, wipe these guys out.
Guess that's life. Okay, 1990, it's over 30 years ago. All right, and that is it. So the goals for next time, we will be back on August 30th, is to get loop operations demo. I mean, the demo here means, you know, we want it to be real. It's not just talking about it, not just thinking about it, but getting something working. Also want a hard cell 3 sequencer demo. We don't even really know what that is yet. We shall find out. And also, as always, have some fun. Again, I will pause here at the end and get the render starting. I will then stay, we'll still be going live in the live stream until the top of the hour. In the meantime, thanks so much for checking this all out. I hope you're doing all right. I hope to see you next time. All right, let me, so I'll start this one over. What the heck? All right, and I'm going to stop recording. All right, still streaming. All right, I guess I'm going to mute the microphone here because the fans on the workstation are going to start up when I start rendering, but then I will join back in a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Dave Ackley. I'd like to present the results of some work. How can an organism learn during its lifetime, given only its own death as feedback? So organisms with good evaluation functions in their genes will tend to learn good things and will proliferate a source of reinforcement signals. Here's the data we obtained. This is an overview of the world. This diagram depicts the array of inputs that each agent receives. At about 600 time steps, he was quite lucky to survive an extended encounter with a carnivore. The result of the learning algorithm in this interaction was such that it corrected the genetic defect in the action network he was born with. Shortly thereafter, he produced the first of his 4 children. Of course, if you took a stable population of natural guys like this and stuck in a couple of those hand-designed guys, they'd take over in a couple of generations, wipe these guys out. I guess that's life.
I gotta figure out how to fix the workstations, the fan settings on my workstation. That's what it sounds like while it's rendering. Thanks a lot, folks. But I'm trying to make these title cards. I've got the tick tock, right? The countdown. which I think is what's accounting for your video is reaching a wider audience. Because I mean, who can resist a countdown? And not to mention the fact that I'm not completely sure I can pull this off. I mean, like I said a couple of times ago, that by the time we get to how sort of essential is the code that's running in this new programming language that's embedded on top of the entire movable machine and the all of the physics of the Ulam code that I'm writing for this. There's a flexible line. You can put more into the physics, and then the code becomes more trivial, or you can have a leaner physics that might be able to be implemented faster in future hardware or whatever it is, and that would require more sophisticated code, and they all would still count as code-guided replication. But they're not exactly as satisfying if the instruction is just go and all the rest is in the physics that does all the rest of the work. Because if that was the case, then the program would not be very evolvable. The only mutation would be don't go or whatever it is. So we want to try to migrate as much as possible into the to represent it in the code that is represented in software rather than in firmware. I guess if we talk about the Ulam code being represented in firmware. In the future, I would much rather that it would be presented in hardware, that we would take the compiled physics of the elements. That would be debugged by many eyes looking at this in a future project much, much bigger than just me. And then we would actually commit to specific circuits, to hardware that is actually pretty hard to change. And take the ability to reprogram the bespoke physics out of the equation, or at least mostly take it out of the equation, firm up the level of physics, and then we could not be quite so insane to leverage it a little bit more. Right now, when we have the movable feast tiles, all of the physics is getting compiled and written onto internal flash memory in these things, and it can be rewritten by anybody who knows who knows the private key that is used on the keymaster. So we're using traditional crypto to protect the physics, and then we're using spatial distribution to protect the individual representations, like a single diamond matrix is protected by the fact that if you can't get through its edges, or you can't get near it because it runs away, then you really can't, number one, you can't even see what's going on in there, and number two, you can't mess with it. And that's what we want. We want to be taking, in particular, we want to be using space, using the fact that the cellular automata has stuff that isn't, that you can't get a pointer from an arbitrary place in the cellular automata to an arbitrary far away place in the cellular automata. You only have the event window. That buys us robustness and security by having actual spatial separation. But given that there's the whole Linux level at the moment in the T2 tiles, there's the whole Linux level underneath it. If you can attack the Linux level, then you can take over a whole single tile. Now, just taking over this tile doesn't really help you all that much, given that there's 57 other tiles on the grid at the moment, and more to come when we build out the grid further. But there we are. There it is. So we'll just see. I don't know what to think about it. I might be fooling myself to say that I think we could get a set of physics solidly pounded out that is worth putting into hardware. But then, if we look all the way back to the beginning of traditional computers, to ENIAC, UNIVAC, Manchester Mark I, all of the early computers, they were doing tons and tons of stuff that their hardware was very simple, very, very simple. And they were doing whatever they were doing it in software. And they might have said the same thing that I just said, that I can't imagine we'd ever figure out something like the x86 instruction set, for example, or the ARM instruction set, or you name it. But that's kind of the definition of something that is stable enough that we make special hardware support for it. Now, of course, the line gets blurry because, as we know, into all these folks, they can have modifiable memory down in the instruction set. Thanks a lot. As well as, supposedly crypto-protected stuff that even us, the users, supposedly can't get at, and therefore only the people who are the bad guys who crack things and learn about cracks and talk about cracks to each other, they're the ones who can get at it and so forth. And of course, that leads into the whole fantasy dream of computer security. If I just was able to control everything, the trusted computing platform, and certainly a larger goal of the T2 Tile project and the whole Movable Feast and Best Effort and Robust First is to say, I can't even say good luck with that when talking about traditional computer security and the idea of just controlling everything, and therefore then be trustworthy, and so therefore we can leverage everything to the absolute hilt, because the chance of a failure is going to be taken to be zero. Therefore, we can put infinite value on the chance of that error actually happening, and we'll be having a good day. And the fundamental idea is that is just not true. That is just not even close to true. That is not even, it's just so not true. But we go on and we keep dancing. I think John Oliver, when he did this computer security ad with Apple computer security problems, and the slug was something like, keep dancing on the edge of the volcano or something like that. And, and that's what we're doing, at best. Don't want to get too deep in the computer security thing because, it's a negative rant, and I feel in a little bit degree, so in the 12 Steps to Robust, the song, I made up the parody lyrics for the 12 Days of Christmas that I made up for Yoshabak's colloquium that I did online several months ago. Step number one, on the first step to robust, my true love said to me, admit that we have a problem. And that's the reason that it takes I got to go negative at least sometimes, because people will otherwise just say there need be no alternative. And in fact, when I give talks, when I used to go to computer science departments and stuff like that, all the way back in like 2013 and so forth, when I was first talking about all this stuff, it was very much a few people would get it, and they were great, and I was happy to find them, but vastly more people would just continue to interpret everything I was saying through the lens of, yes, well, of course, everything is deterministic. Yes, well, of course, we have a CPU and RAM. Yes, well, of course, we will just fix that bug and then go on as we've been going on. And that is the classic symptom of not admitting that we have a problem. So, but that said, we put it aside and figure out that we're gonna, and so, so the whole point of the T2 Tile project is to provide a positive alternative. Let's say, rather than just sitting around and being a critic and saying, you're not going to be secure, you're bad, I told you so. And I do some of that. I try not to do so much, but, other folks, when, the very next gigantic ransomware thing, or the very next, well, in particular, when the Intels and the AMDs of the world come out with their next chip revision that has a new trust me, trusted computer base, blah blah blah, new things to protect the code and so forth, and then you just start the clock. Does it take 2 months or 2 weeks for researchers to figure out how to bypass the new levels of security? And if it was doable at all, you would have thought they would have gotten it by now. But the problem is, to even head in the direction of doing it right, it costs efficiency, and you have to do work to be systematic about it, whether or not it actually is there a shortcut that you might be able to take. And the problem is, if there is a shortcut you could take in a conditional sense, that if the data goes this way, I could just cut out this whole section of processing and save time, is that means that it's detectable from the outside world whether you took that shortcut or not. And by doing that, you leak information about what you're working on, and then that wasn't supposed to be allowed. It was supposed to be impossible for anybody from the outside to learn anything about what's going on inside. So the hardware designers, and it's built into their DNA, go as fast as possible, go as fast as possible. And and I feel the same way when it comes to trying to buy the chips inside here, the Texas Instruments ARM chips that these things use, they run at a gigahertz, and that's great. And I would love, why couldn't we run them at 2 gigahertz, except for the fact that we wouldn't be able to get away with passive cooling like these things do, or more or less passive cooling. So, when it comes to wanting the maximum number of MIPS for my bucks, I'm the same as everybody else. But the way you do that is by relentlessly taking shortcuts everywhere you possibly can, and therefore inevitably leaking tremendous amounts of information as you go. So, instead of sitting around and complaining all the time, like I'm doing here, we've got the T2 tile project where we're saying, let's build an alternative. Let's, yes, we're going to admit that we have a problem. We're going to think robust first. We're going to build bottom up. We're going to do all the 12 steps of the 12-step to robust. What's the opposite of efficiency? Is it waste? Well, it's robustness, or it could be. And so, one of the things I haven't talked about it. Whoops. Okay, that's our time warning on the render. Let me just see. Okay, it's still got a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to keep ranting here. I mean, since we decided, or since what I've been doing is putting up the entire live stream, even though I take the trimmed version and put that up in higher quality and so forth, I look at the statistics over time, and there's a fair number of people who continue to check out the live stream long after it's not live anymore. So why not talk to them? As well as any folks that are still checking in here, and again, thank you. But for the rest of the time, I mean, what the heck? This is like sort of official, off the record. Yeah, that's what it is. Off the record. That's why I'm putting it up visually, putting it up publicly for the entire globe. So anyway, I'm just going to run my thoughts while we've got another 10 minutes here. I don't know if I can run them that long. Of course I can run them that long. Anyway, so one of my concerns that I haven't really talked about before is, okay, let's say by December, the code of the ancestor is starting to exist. I mean, that's pretty much a best case outcome. I mean, there's a ton of stuff still to be designed, written, debugged, rewritten, redebugged, and so forth before we even can get to the point of really starting to write the high-level ancestor code. Although, certainly for the last couple of months of this process, if not more, we're going to need to be co-designing, co-writing the ancestor code while evolving the hardware that it runs on, so we can negotiate, how much can we manage to put into the code where it'll be potentially mutatable and, more interesting. That everything we can put into the code means we're going to have a larger universe of possible creatures that the same underlying physics could represent just by changing the software, versus how much we end up resorting to putting into the physics in order to actually get something to work. And anyway, so the concern is by the time we get to, December or whatever it happens to be, that suppose it's working okay. Suppose we actually have some non-trivial little sequence of code that says, make this loop and fork off a new process over there and then do this until that happens. That's what I'm imagining the code is going to be like. And it starts to look like, this thing might actually succeed, but it's going to take a month of grid runtime in order to do one generation, and then it'll take another month for the daughter to have the daughters to have kids as well. So we might, and again, I would sort of consider this to be about the best case. We might actually miss the deadline, January 3rd, 2023, because the thing is still running. So we don't actually have grandchildren for the ancestor yet. We might just be in the process of giving birth to the first child of the ancestor, or whatever it happens to be. So that is a concern, and, again, if I get far enough that it's actually working in a non-trivial way and it's just too slow, that's the whole purpose of this. The whole purpose is to say, let's find a new arrangement of stuff that we say, well, it would be cool if we would take this stuff and put this stuff in hardware now. Rather than just saying, well, here's something that I can figure out how to do in hardware, and maybe somebody will buy it. I'm going to call it the 8008, and it's got 128 bytes of programmable memory. You can make it do anything you want. And then that's what we've been doing the whole time along, is instead saying, okay, now we know. We want something that can execute event windows fast, robustly, and be able to do the communication so that when this event window makes some changes, a next event window over here will see those changes in a reasonably consistent, in a reasonably locally consistent way. So if we can get to the point where we actually achieve the goal for 2022, have another goal for 2023 maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But if we can get to the point where it actually works and the only problem is it's too slow, then that's where I want to declare success. That's where I want to say, hey DARPA, hey Intel, hey AMD, what about speeding this up by a factor of 1 million? Like that. This particular thing, we can retune it and change it and so forth in the process we do it, as long as we stick to the fundamental principles, indefinite scalability, best effort, and so on. So, all right, I think, are we done with the render? The render is done. All right, well, I'm going to try to get it started uploading. Which means we might be interfering with the stream bandwidth. I don't know. We'll see. It ought to be all right. I have so little upstream bandwidth anyway that it's probably fine. Okay, upload videos, select files, T2sday. All right. Okay, well, uploading 0%, and uploading 1%. Okay, so I think 32 minutes left of upload time. Excellent. Where are we here? Here we are. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. So that's the goal. Reduce it to a problem where we just need to speed it up. And that, having the existence of the T2 tile project actually running, physically running. The point is, and I've said this before, when you do science and you make abstractions and you observe things and make conclusions, what you get is a truth. When you do engineering and build things and do demos, what you get is a capability, at least in principle, that another person could take the demo that you did and start out by doing the same thing, start out by repeating the demo, and then say, okay, now I could modify this in this way and that way and so forth. With science, you get the results of an experiment, and what you get is a truth, and people could repeat the experiment if they want, and of course that doesn't happen nearly as much as it should, but the whole point is that experimental design is engineering. It's building a machine to observe the world in a certain way, and therefore people that are trying to replicate the experiment, they have to build the machine so that they will observe the world in a equivalent way, if not an equal way, because you can't step in the same river twice, and that if the covenant that a scientific paper is making is that, except for the details that I have laid down here, which go into the machine, the experimental machine that you need to build as engineers, as long as you obey these rules, you will observe similar analogous things to what I observe. You will observe statistics which are in the same range as the statistics I observe, and so forth. And in that sense, a scientific paper is actually a demo of a machine to do an experiment. And scientists don't think about that nearly enough. Theoreticians don't think about it hardly at all. But even, practicing empirical scientists, everybody wants to focus on the truth. The mu pi boson exists, or whatever it happens to be, rather than and we had to build this CERN vacuum tunnel that's the size of Pluto, or whatever it is, in order to do that observation. We had to build this experiment machine that you'd have to build one if you observe these results. So with demos, with the approach that I'm taking, the build bottom-up approach, this is the expert. For each of the 12 steps to robust, there's actually a special hand gesture for each one. I said if we ever get to 1,000 subscribers on the T2 Tile project, I would sing the 12 steps to robust. So far, no problem. We're still safe. Anyway, okay. Well, hey, if anybody thinks this kind of ranting, well, whatever. The great supporters out there that watch the trimmed demos, they will have no idea this exists, and so be it. And the hardcore, in-depth folks that prefer clicking around live streams and finding their own things to watch, they will perhaps run into this and make of it whatever they make of it. I guess people hardly ever put comments on the live stream videos after the fact comments, but I guess people could. I don't know. Okay, so that's it. I will see folks next time, but we're coming into the top of the hour. All right, so I guess we will wind it up here. So what do you think? Is it worth, what do they call it, vamping? Just filling in the time? Except I don't really know whether vamping is real or if that's just from that Aaron Sorkin newsroom show or whatever that they were talking about. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks again, folks. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And, for folks that are willing to, get into the Discord thing, I try to put a couple of progress reports during the 2-week period between updates in the #progress section of the T2 Tile Discord. So, hey, check it out. Look at me. I'm advertising. I'm marketing. All right, that's it.